been a long battle for those who decided to stay.
D.U. Joshi was the judge who was hearing the Gulberg case. So one is actually the plight of the physically the actual survivors, the families who actually were displaced or who were affected by the violence, who were family members of those 2,500 who were brutally massacred. That's one level. The second level, I think, very important to focus is on the community that was targeted, which is the largest minority, which is Muslims, and what is their socio-economic placement, what is their situation just now, the wider Muslim community, other religious minorities. It was horrific. This was in, and what is really painful to me, maybe it's idealistic to me, is that post 2007 I see the shift even in the media. You know, that you feel that media has also shifted, which was not so markedly so earlier, after the second election of Modi. And that's really sad to see, because it's almost as if it's not simply being tired and wanting to forget it, but it's also the feeling that, you know, it's a whitewash of figures. That made that day, many VIPs, including Advani and Sonia Ji, etc., was the call that he made to Modi. Because if the media is the fourth estate, if the media is a freedom of expression, surely media should be concerned about the fact that the basic forms of working out a democracy is the basic way you work yourself out. The fact that in the Sachivalaya and Gandhinagar, journalists are not allowed to step in. They can go as far as the canteen, but they can't go to ministers' rooms and get their information like you can do after 2 p.m. in Bombay. You can't do it. Now, surely that makes for a story, because I think it makes for the kind of dictatorship that surrounds this Modi government, which almost seems to lure, you know, the middle class into believing that, you know, an authoritarian setup is what we need. Dead by now. That kind of response Jaffrey got. So there's a complete freeze on information of a certain kind to preserve this aura around Modi. And I think this is something which really needs to be discussed, both academically and otherwise, because we are really looking at a post-2002 a dictatorial, authoritarian setup within the democratic framework, of course, which is tom-tomming the fact that it's winning elections and winning them thumpingly. A televised courtroom that you should have a CC not got more than 51%. 51% is huge, but it's still not 100%. So I think we need to remember that it's not 100%, and that the rest of the 49% or 50%.
Combat citizens, justice and peace Bombay. You all know her background. And with that, I just say as a common thing, but just to say that, well, it's going to be almost a decade now since the election. And over this period, we found on one side an effort to try and legitimize achievements to Modi and his co-conspirators. Not merely by trying to declare that anybody who is critical and looks back to 2002 and its implications is casting a slur on the state, and on people, a sort of kind of subnationalism used to justify a crime. And of course the other is to try and legitimize the man by actually trying to say that he's built this vibrant, investor-friendly Gujarat where agriculture is doing much better than anywhere else in the country and so on. The evidence, I think, is clear that much of this, almost all of it, is actually propaganda. It's a created message which is trying to absolve him of that crime. And it's been a long battle for those who decided to stay and fight it, to bring justice. We're convinced that you can bring justice to the victims and survivors and punish the criminals. And among the names, of course, stands out Teesta Setalvad. Her commitment to more humane order, her ability to stay by her struggle, and of course her courage in the context of threats which were by no means covert, has always been an inspiration for many of us who otherwise might have succumbed to the tendency to forget as time goes by and not really keep the battle going. So it is a privilege for me to be sitting here when she delivers this talk to you on the social and political context as it's evolved in the period since 2002.
Issues, it is because of SEMAT that we are able, Communism Combat and CJP now, to be able to function as comfortably as we can in Bombay, because we don't have an office here, but SEMAT is our home and office. So I'd like to say thank you to SEMAT for that. overlooking these 9 years post Gujarat 2002, I think there's several different layers in which one will have to look at it. I would like to look at it first of all from the point of view of the survivors themselves, who 23,000 of whom are still living in, now you can't call them relief camps, but in transit camps, and who get delegated to the annual stories around February and March, which keep coming out, or when there's a NHRC report that gets tabled about relief or rehabilitation and standards are not being met. So one is actually the plight of physically the actual survivors, the families who actually were displaced or were affected by the violence, who were family members of those 2,500 who were brutally massacred. That's one level. The second level, I think, very important to focus is on the community that was targeted, which is the largest minority, which is Muslims, and what is their socio-economic placement, what is their situation just now. The wider Muslim community, other religious minorities. And as much as important as all this, I think, is this whole discourse of the vibrant, developing Gujarat that has actually been very cleverly constructed along with the help of certain corporate honchos to be able to whitewash what happened in 2002. And I think that's a very, very, very new thing we saw post 2002. We had 84 in Delhi. I'd like to say we had 84 in Delhi. We saw even those who had been named in the PUCL report, who are the guilty, being given tickets by Rajiv Gandhi's government in the December of that year. And that must be stated. But I think there was no real desire to whitewash. And there was no clear-cut attempt to whitewash in the way it's happened in Gujarat, in the fashion in which a whole set of people had sort of ganged up. And what is really painful to me, maybe it's idealistic to me, is that post-2007 I see the shift even in the media. That you feel that media has also shifted. It was not so markedly so earlier, after the second election of Modi. And that's really sad to see, because it's almost as if it's not simply being tired and wanting to forget it, but it's also the feeling that, it's a whitewash of figures. So for instance, I'd like to just mention that when Hindi Outlook did this recent article, which I think all of you should read, Aakro ki Bauchar mein Bhatka Hua Vikas. That was Hindi Outlook, which did it just after the Vibrant Gujarat thing. There's stories to be told, because when the journalist went down, he had to be a journalist who was out of Gujarat who did the story. He was tailed consistently by the PR department of the state. And in fact, after the article appeared in Hindi Outlook, the PR man called him up, and I won't name him, and said that, why did you do this? So he said, I told you that I don't believe in Namak Harami and Namak Halali. I ate with you, but I was coming to an independent story, so I have done my story. So there's a constant pressure on journalists not to report. What I'm trying to say is it's not a benign thing that's happening. Vice President Hamid Ansari in 2009, in one of the opening speeches he gave after he became Vice President, offered a very interesting set of figures when he spoke to Parliament in one of his first speeches, where he said the measure of a democracy has to be surely the measure on which how many days Parliament and assemblies sit and deliberate on issues. And he presented a nationwide figure. And believe it or not, Gujarat had sat for just 17 days. The Gujarat Assembly had sat 17 days out of 365 in that year. Now, what really bothers me and some of us is that I don't understand how the media can't be concerned about this. Because if the media is a fourth estate, if the media is a freedom of expression, surely media should be concerned about the fact that the basic forms of working out a democracy is the basic way you work yourself out. The fact that in the Sachivalaya and Gandhinagar, journalists are not allowed to step in. They can go as far as the canteen, but they can't go to ministers' rooms and get their information like you can do after 2 p.m. in Bombay. You can't do it. Now, surely that makes for a story, because I think it makes for the kind of dictatorship that surrounds this Modi government, which almost seems to lure the middle class into believing that an authoritarian setup is what we need. So I just like to place some of the things I'm saying in that context. That it's and then again, the play up to elections, before and after an election. Just before the 2009 elections, I thought it was very important that one statement by Shuri in February led to a series of interviews by well-known television anchors, all in aeroplanes, by the way. None were on the ground. They were all in the private planes where Modi was traveling in one place or the other, all projecting him as future Prime Minister. Now, this is, it's all part of the make-up job. It's not a spontaneous thing that's happening. Christophe Defrelot, who's a French historian who's done some work on the Hindu right and who's also done some work on Ambedkar and others, he had done a very interesting, I write-up for Outlook last year when Outlook critiqued the Indian media. It brought out a special issue on the corporatization of the Indian media, etc. And his piece was on the right wing. And he mentioned how Modi has hired this American company at $25,000 a month, Amtrak India. The details are here. And I wonder who's paying that bill. Is it the taxpayer who's paying the bill? He's supposed to be an honest politician. We know he's not. He's got huge amounts of land and money stashed away. So who's paying that bill? I mean, I've never heard of a journalist trying to investigate Modi's affidavit. Today I was quite humbled when I read about Buddhadev Bhattacharya's personal assets. You know, that 5,000 rupees, no bank account. I mean, it's a very humbling thing to read about a chief minister of a state. And nobody's ever dared to write. Maninagar has filed his nomination. He must have filed his personal assets then. I've written about 5 RTI inquiries to get Modi's affidavit. They just refuse it. The Gujarat RTI refuses to give it. So there's a complete freeze on information of a certain kind to preserve this aura around Modi. And I think this is something which really needs to be discussed, both academically and otherwise, because we are really looking at a post-2002 a dictatorial authoritarian setup within the democratic framework, of course, which is tom-tomming the fact that it's winning elections and winning them thumpingly. Never mind that 4 days back, the day Sanjeev Bhatt's story broke, they lost Gandhinagar. So I mean, maybe things do change sometimes. So again, I would like to just point out a few things. The Vibrant Gujarat was begun. 2000. You had one in 2007. You had one in 2000. I think 2003 you've had so far. So you've had 2007, 9 and 11, 3 Vibrant Gujarats every 2 years. Even about Vibrant Gujarat, by the language of the corporates, by the language of business journalists, I'm not talking about a radical language, I'm not talking about a critiquing language. The realization of funds has just been 20% of what the promissories were. And yet, you still have this whole thing about it being a vibrant state. FDIs, Maharashtra still much higher, but very bad obviously at a PR job compared to Gujarat. So this sort of figures which tell you Dalit children, child labor used. I mean, you look at the areas like Saurashtra and Bhavnagar where you have the diamond cutting industry, huge exploitation of labor, which has always been there. It's not only under Modi, but it remains so today. You have a situation where the poverty differentials for the Muslim community are very, very poor. They're very close to SC, STs in Gujarat. These are established figures which are available, can be shared. So what really worries, and they're available everywhere, it's not some confidential information. Are journalists then not reading? Are the political opposition not interested in pointing this out? Because I think that's also a real problem, that the political opposition is quite happy to go along with this myth of a vibrant Gujarat, the political opposition in the state. Last year, Himanshu, whom we know, Himanshu Kumar, whom we all know after his Dantewada experience, he did this very interesting yatra. He was doing this yatra in all the tribal areas of the central India. And he entered Gujarat on, I think, 19th of August. And he was forcibly evicted out on 8th of September. He entered from Sabarkantha and he went down to Panchmal, Dahod, etc. And then around Vapi, the cops just picked him up and said, get out. And why did they found him dangerous? They found him dangerous because there's an MLA in Gujarat called Mohan Singh Rathore, elected MLA, who hails from the tribal communities, who is also the chairperson of the Public Accounts Committee, who has actually collected all the applications made by Adivasis under the new rules of the Forest and Tribal Act. And 1 lakh plus applications have been made for land to the Gujarat government, and not a single acre has been given. So this man goes around telling people this, that you've made your applications and you're not getting your land. And Himanshu was traveling with him, and that everywhere they went, they were getting 10,000, 20,000 Adivasis who were listening to their story. And obviously that was problematic for the government because it was like a mobilization going on. And he was forcibly evicted out. Now, in the same tribal belt of South Gujarat, 1 lakh hectares has been given to a media house. Now, these are the kind of things that are being clocked by some people, they're being collected by some people, but they're not making inroads into the quote-unquote national consciousness, and certainly not in Delhi and Bombay.